The millionaire lived in a world where gold did not shine the way it once did. Expensive cars, private planes, and grand parties filled his days, but none of it touched his heart anymore. People spoke about him like he had everything. Yet if someone looked closely, his eyes told a different story. They were tired eyes, eyes that searched for something he himself could not name. He owned a mansion that stood on a small hill above the city. At night, the glowing lights made the house look like a palace floating in the dark. Inside, hallways stretched for what felt like miles. Paintings, statues, and priceless decorations filled every space. And in the center hall of the mansion stood a grand black piano. It was polished every day so that it shined like a dark mirror. The millionaire used that piano to entertain himself and his guests. Music was not a gift to him. It was a way to pass time. When guests gathered, he often laughed and said, "Play the piano. I want to laugh," as if music existed only for his amusement. Many musicians played for him, some in fear, others in frustration. They played because he paid well, not because they wished to. Servants and staff in the mansion had watched this many times. Some found it strange, some found it cruel, but everyone stayed silent. The millionaire was not known to be patient, and nobody wished to risk their job. A few weeks before his story changed, a new housekeeper arrived. She was quiet, moving through the mansion like a whisper. She kept her head down, spoke only when necessary, and always worked with care. The staff quickly saw that she was different. She had a softness in her actions, as if she held some part of herself hidden away. Nobody knew her past. Some wondered about it, whispering among themselves while cleaning dishes or folding linens. "She seems gentle," one worker said. "She must have come from a very simple life." Another replied, "Maybe. Or maybe life was not simple at all for her." The housekeeper kept to herself and did not join their guesses. She worked, ate, and rested. That was all. But every time she passed by the piano in the main hall, something in her eyes changed. She would slow down just a little. Her steps, turning soft like a memory, had reached out and touched her. She never stopped, but the piano called to her in silence. The millionaire, however, never paid attention to her. For him, she was just another worker in the mansion. Someone who changed curtains, cleaned floors, and made sure everything stayed in perfect order. Days passed, then weeks. The housekeeper became familiar with the rhythm of the mansion. Breakfast was served at 9 every morning. Guests arrived at least 3 nights a week. The laughter of wealthy strangers echoed in the theme. Halls until very late. Then there were quiet mornings when everyone slept, and the house felt like a museum. On such a morning, the millionaire sat alone in the hall, staring at the piano. He touched one key lightly, and a soft note floated in the air. Then he pressed another, trying to form something like a melody, but it came out uneven, a sound without a soul. Suddenly, he removed his hand quickly, almost angry with himself. It was then that he noticed the housekeeper walking past the door. "You there?" he said. She stopped, surprised. "Yes, sir. Do you play?" he asked, pointing at the piano. She hesitated. "I have played before." He waved his hand. "Good. Tonight there is a gathering. You will play something for the guests." Her breath caught for a moment. "Sir, I am only a housekeeper." "Yes, and tonight you will also play," he said. Already turning away, she stood quietly for a moment after he left, her heart beating faster. She placed her hand on the piano for just a second before pulling it away, afraid someone might see. That night, the mansion lit up with sound and perfume and silk dresses that brushed the floor like waves. Laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked. The millionaire welcomed everyone with his usual confidence. Then, when the moment felt right, he clapped his hands. "My friends," he said loudly. "Tonight, we have something interesting. Our new housekeeper will play the piano for us. I believe it will be entertaining." A few guests laughed. Some looked impressed. Others looked confused. The housekeeper stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly. She could feel eyes on her, curious, judgmental, amused. The millionaire smiled, expecting to laugh, expecting a performance that would entertain him. She sat down at the piano. The seat felt familiar in a way that hurt her heart. She took a long breath. The room waited. Then she placed her fingers on the keys. She did not think of the guests. She did not think of the millionaire. She thought of a small house she once lived in, where music echoed through evenings lit by warm lamps. She thought of hands that once guided hers, showing her how to speak without words, and she played. The first note was soft but full, then another and another, flowing like water, like wind through trees, like something alive. People stopped talking. Slowly, heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Her music filled every corner of the hall. It was not just a song. It was a story of love, of pain, of hope, of a life held together by sound when everything else had fallen apart. The millionaire's smile faded. Something heavy moved in his chest, something he had not felt for many years. No one laughed. Not even once. When the music ended, the housekeeper lifted her hands from the keys. Silence followed, a silence that felt respectful. She stood and stepped back. The millionaire looked at her, but no words came out. His throat tightened, and he had to look away. The guests began to clap, not because they were expected to, but because they could not help themselves. The millionaire watched the housekeeper walk away. For the first time in a very long time, he felt small. Not unimportant, but human. He remembered his own words from earlier days. "Play the piano. I want to laugh." Tonight, nobody laughed. Something in the world had changed, and he did not yet understand it. But he would soon. The days following the unforgettable evening passed in a blur for the mansion. Guests came and went. Events were hosted, and the millionaire continued his life filled with luxury. Yet something had shifted. The music of the housekeeper lingered in his mind like a shadow that refused to leave. Every time he saw the piano, he thought of the soft notes, the emotion behind her playing, and the silence that had followed. He had expected entertainment, amusement, laughter. Perhaps, but instead, he had received something he could not name. The housekeeper went about her work with the same quiet diligence. She cleaned, organized, and maintained the mansion without drawing attention to herself. Yet the staff noticed a change in her as well. She carried herself with a subtle confidence now, a quiet strength that was new, as if that night had released something inside her. When she moved past the piano, she did not pause in fear or hesitation anymore. There was a familiarity in her steps, a recognition that the instrument belonged to her as much as it belonged to anyone who had heard her play. The millionaire tried to ignore her at first. He told himself that music was just a coincidence, that she was just lucky to play well that night. But deep down, he could not shake the feeling that something had changed inside the mansion, something that challenged his understanding of wealth and power. He found himself watching her sometimes, noticing how her hands moved with precision and care, how she listened to the sounds around her before speaking, how her presence filled the space in a way that was different from anyone else. One afternoon, as the sun poured golden light through the tall windows, he found himself standing near the piano again. He touched the keys lightly, not with the intention to play, but just to feel the cold smoothness of them. The sound that came out was empty, hollow, and it reminded him of the laughter he had expected. He realized that he had never actually listened to music before that night. Not really. He had listened for amusement, for distraction, never for the story it told or the feelings it carried. The housekeeper walked past him silently, carrying a tray of fresh tea. She noticed his fingers on the keys, but said nothing, placing the tray carefully on the side table before continuing with her tasks. He looked at her and asked quietly, almost without thinking, "Can you play something now?" Her eyes met his briefly. "Sir?" she asked, uncertain. "I want to hear it again," he said. "Not for the guests, not for anyone else, just for me." For a moment she hesitated. This was unusual. She had played when asked publicly, but never like this, never for him alone, in a quiet moment. She nodded softly and walked to this piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys, taking in the quiet before she began. The music she created was different this time. It was softer, more personal. She played with restraint, yet every note carried depth. The millionaire closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. He could feel the emotions she poured into the melody, the memories, the longing, the quiet strength. It was as if she spoke without words, telling him stories he had never understood before. He opened his eyes after a while, noticing a small smile on her lips. It was not forced, not for show. It was a gentle smile, a reflection of her own connection to the music. He realized in that moment that the housekeeper was more than her position, more than the work she did around the mansion. She had a life, a past, and talents that had remained hidden until now. From that day onward, he began to see her differently. It was subtle at first. He noticed her more when she moved through the hallways. He listened when she spoke. He even found excuses to pass by her room to see her at the piano. The staff noticed the change too, seeing that their employer was less impatient, less demanding, more thoughtful. They whispered quietly among themselves, surprised at the transformation. The housekeeper, on her part, continued her work with care. She did not let the attention affect her. She had learned long ago that life demanded strength and humility in equal measure. But she also began to play more often, sometimes for herself, sometimes for the millionaire when he asked quietly, without fanfare. Music became a bridge between them, a silent understanding that words could not convey. One evening, a close friend of the millionaire visited the mansion. Over dinner, they discussed various matters, from business deals to the latest news. The conversation eventually turned to art and music. A friend asked, "Do you listen to music often? Or is it all just background noise for you?" The millionaire paused, thinking of the housekeeper and the way she played. "I have heard music before," he said slowly, "but I have never really listened. Not until recently." His friend raised an eyebrow. What changed? He did not answer immediately. Later, when the housekeeper passed by, he simply said, "Play for me later, when it is quiet." The days turned into weeks. The housekeeper's music became a part of the mansion's rhythm. Staff members began to notice that when she played, everything seemed lighter. Even the millionaire found moments of peace, sitting quietly while she filled the hall with her melodies. It was not entertainment, not a performance for status, but something deeper. It touched the heart, reminded one of lost memories, and stirred emotions long buried. During this time, the housekeeper shared small fragments of her past. She told stories about her childhood, about how she had learned to play on an old, broken piano in a small home, how music had been her refuge, her companion through difficult days. She never spoke much about her hardships, but the sincerity in her voice and the way she described the music made it clear that she had faced challenges with courage and grace. The millionaire listened more than he spoke. He realized that wealth and power had never given him the depth he felt in those moments. The mansion, the parties, the grand possessions, they were empty without understanding, without connection, without emotion. Her music showed him what he had been missing, not only in sound but in life, One rainy afternoon, the millionaire found her playing softly, her fingers gliding over the keys as the rain tapped gently on the windows. He watched from the doorway, noticing how the droplets reflected in her eyes, the way she seemed completely absorbed in the music. He stepped forward slowly, not wanting to disturb her. When she finished, she looked up, slightly startled, and smiled. "You were listening," she said quietly. "I was," he replied. I understand more now." From that moment, a subtle friendship grew between them. It was not spoken loudly, not announced with grand gestures, but existed in shared moments of music and understanding. He began to ask her questions about her life, her past, her experiences. She answered with honesty, never exaggerating or hiding, sharing only what she felt comfortable revealing. One evening, he asked her to play something he had never heard before, something new, something that would tell him a story he could not imagine. She hesitated, then began to play. The music that flowed was different from before, brave, passionate, and full of longing. It spoke of journeys, of dreams, of hidden courage. He realized that she was not only a talented musician, but also a storyteller, using her music to communicate. What words could not dot as weeks passed, their connection deepened. The millionaire, who had always measured life in wealth and influence, began to understand the value of humility, of listening, of empathy. The housekeeper, who had endured hardships and uncertainty, found a sense of respect and appreciation that she had not known before. The mansion, once a place of cold luxury, began to feel warmer, more alive, filled with genuine emotion. The staff noticed the change, too. They no longer saw their employer as merely demanding or eccentric. They witnessed moments of reflection, of kindness, and of genuine admiration for the housekeeper's talents. They whispered to one another, realizing that the walls of the mansion had witnessed a transformation, not only in music, but in the hearts of those who lived within it. And so, life in the mansion continued, but it was no longer the same. Music had brought change, not just entertainment. It had introduced honesty, emotion, and understanding into a world that had long been filled with appearances and wealth. The millionaire and the housekeeper, through shared silence and shared notes, began to learn from one another. Each day became a small journey, each melody a lesson, each glance a conversation unspoken, but deeply felt. In this way, the mansion, once a palace of luxury and emptiness, became a place where hearts could speak, where music could heal, and where human connection began to take root again. The evening arrived with a soft golden light spilling into the mansion. The millionaire had invited a few close friends and some business associates for what he called an intimate dinner, though for anyone else it would have felt grand. The staff moved efficiently, ensuring that every plate, every glass, and every detail reflected perfection. Yet amidst all the preparations, the millionaire's mind wandered to the housekeeper. He wondered if she would play tonight, and what music she would create. The thought made him uneasy in a way he had never experienced. He was used to control, to having everything planned, but tonight he did not know what to expect. Guests arrived, laughter and conversation filled the air. The millionaire welcomed them with charm and ease, masking the inner tension he felt. Everyone complimented the decor, the food, and the view from the large windows. But despite the grandeur, his attention kept drifting toward the piano and the woman who had changed his perspective on music. At the end of dinner, the millionaire decided it was time. He raised his hand slightly, signaling everyone to quiet down. All eyes turned to him. He cleared his throat and spoke with a mix of authority and anticipation. "My friends," he said, "tonight we have a special performance. Our new housekeeper will play the piano for us. Let's see what she has to offer." The guests murmured with curiosity. Some had heard of her talent from previous gatherings. while others were seeing her for the first time. The housekeeper stepped forward, carrying herself with calm confidence. She did not speak, only nodded briefly to acknowledge the request dot as she sat at the piano. The millionaire observed closely. He had expected something entertaining, something to make him laugh as usual, but something in the way she positioned her hands, the way she exhaled before pressing the keys, told him that tonight would be different. The first note struck the room with quiet power. Her fingers moved gracefully, producing a melody that was delicate yet firm. It was as if the piano itself had come alive, telling a story that needed no words. Guests leaned forward, captivated, their earlier chatter forgotten. Some closed their eyes, allowing the music to carry them to a place they could not define. The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. He had experienced music before, of course, in concert halls and in recordings, but never like this. This was raw, honest, and personal. It stirred something deep inside him, a memory of a childhood long forgotten, a feeling he had buried under wealth and ambition. She played without pause, her focus unbroken. Every note seemed deliberate, every pause meaningful. The melody rose and fell like waves on a calm ocean, carrying emotion that the millionaire could not articulate. It was not flashy or dramatic, but it held a truth that made the air itself. Heavier, more alive dot, after several minutes, the room remained silent, even as the last note lingered. No one spoke. The guests were moved, some with tears glistening in their eyes. The millionaire, who usually commanded attention with his words, could not form any. He simply sat, staring at the housekeeper, trying to understand the impact of what he had just witnessed. Finally, she lifted her hands from the keys and stood. She did not bow or smile, only returned to her place quietly. The silence continued for a moment, filled with unspoken admiration and awe. Then slowly, the applause began. It was soft at first, then grew, but even then it felt subdued, respectful. Everyone understood that this was not a performance for entertainment. It was an expression of something far more profound. The millionaire found himself standing, clapping, though his hands shook slightly. He realized that he had underestimated her, underestimated not just her talent, but the depth of feeling she could convey. His usual amusement, his expectation of laughter, was replaced by humility. For the first time in a long time, he understood that music could touch the soul in a way nothing else could. After the applause, some guests approached her, complimenting her skill and asking about her training. She spoke simply, sharing small details about her past, always with humility and grace. She told them about her early days learning on a worn-out piano, about the hardships she faced, and about how music had been a refuge through difficult times. Her words carried sincerity, and the guests listened, captivated not only by her talent, but by her story. The millionaire, however, remained silent. He wanted to speak, to express the gratitude and amazement he felt, but words seemed inadequate. He watched her, noticing the poise and dignity she carried, the way she balanced humility with strength. He realized that she had more than talent. She had character, resilience, and a quiet wisdom that wealth could never buy. As the evening progressed, the guests lingered, enjoying conversation and refreshments, but the mansion had changed subtly. The atmosphere, once filled with formalities and show, now held a sense of connection, of shared experience. Even the staff moved with lighter steps, sensing the shift in the dynamic between their employer and the housekeeper. Later that night, after the guests had left and the mansion had grown quiet, the millionaire found himself alone in the hall. The housekeeper was nearby, arranging chairs and tidying the room. He approached her, his voice softer than usual. "Tonight, you were remarkable. I cannot thank you enough." She looked up, her expression calm. "Thank you, sir. I only did what I could." "You did more than that," he replied. "You reminded me of something I had forgotten. You reminded me that life is more than wealth, more than power, more than appearances. Your music. It speaks." She nodded slightly, understanding more. And words could convey. There was a connection forming, subtle but undeniable, built on respect, shared moments, and understanding. In the following days, the millionaire began to notice her presence in new ways. He listened when she spoke. He sought her opinion on matters unrelated to her work, and he found excuses to see her play more often. Music became not just an occasional diversion, but a bridge between them, a language they shared without needing to speak. The housekeeper, for her part, continued her work diligently. She did not seek attention or favor. Yet she began to feel a sense of purpose beyond her duties. Her music was no longer just a secret part of her life. It had become a means of connection, a way to touch lives, to communicate in a mansion filled with people who had never truly listened. As weeks turned into months, their understanding deepened. The millionaire learned to appreciate not only her talent, but her perspective on life. He began to reflect on his own actions, his own choices, and the emptiness he had often felt despite material abundance. The housekeeper, in turn, learned to navigate a world that had always been unfamiliar, finding confidence in her abilities and in the subtle influence she held. One rainy afternoon, the millionaire found her playing a new melody. The rain tapped against the windows, blending with the soft notes of the piano. He watched her from the doorway, noticing how completely absorbed she was, how natural the music felt to her. It was not just skill. It was a part of her, a reflection of her soul. When she finished, she looked up and saw him standing silently. "You listened," she said quietly. "I always do now," he replied. "And I learn every time." In this quiet exchange, something profound took root. Respect, admiration, understanding, and trust grew between them, forming a bond that went beyond roles and titles. Music had become their shared language, and through it, they discovered a new way to see and value each other. The mansion, once filled with noise and opulence, had begun to feel alive in a different way. The air seemed lighter, the halls warmer, the presence of its residents more meaningful. Guests who visited sensed the difference, though they could not name it. Staff members moved with renewed purpose, inspired by the subtle harmony in the mansion's life. And so life continued, richer not in gold, but in understanding, emotion, and connection. The millionaire had learned a lesson he had never anticipated, that true wealth could not be measured by possessions or status, but by the depth of human experience, the honesty of expression, and the bonds formed through shared understanding. The housekeeper had found her place, not just as a caretaker, but as a storyteller, a musician, and a bridge between hearts. Music had done more than entertain. It had transformed lives, reshaped relationships, and reminded everyone that even in the grandest of mansions, it was the quiet, sincere moments that truly mattered. And in the midst of wealth and opulence, a simple melody had the power to reveal the extraordinary humanity that lay within each person, waiting to be heard, understood, and appreciated. The next morning, the mansion was quiet, bathed in the soft light of early sun filtering through tall windows. The millionaire, as usual, wandered through the main hall, but today he felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in his chest, a need to hear the housekeeper play once again. It had become more than a curiosity. It had become a necessity, a way to understand a part of himself that he had long ignored. He found her arranging flowers in the lounge, moving with calm precision. When he approached, she looked up, her expression neutral but attentive. He paused for a moment, unsure how to begin, then said quietly, "Will you play for me?" She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Of course, sir." She moved to the piano, her footsteps soft against the polished floor. He watched her sit and place her fingers gently on the keys. There was a reverence in her touch, as if the piano were not merely an instrument, but a living being, a companion in her life. First note rang out, clear and delicate. He closed his eyes, letting the sound fill the space, feeling it sink deep into his chest. She played with a rhythm that felt alive, ebbing and flowing like a river. Each note carried emotion, each pause a story unspoken. The music was not for show, not for applause, but for expression, for communication of the deepest parts of the heart. He thought of his past, the years spent chasing wealth, the endless accumulation of things that never brought satisfaction. He remembered moments of loneliness, laughter that felt hollow, and the constant desire to be admired. And now, listening to her, he realized how empty it all had been. The music was telling him what he could not say, showing him a truth that had been hidden beneath layers of pride and habit. The housekeeper played without hesitation, her focus unwavering. She did not glance at the audience she knew he represented, nor did she seek approval. She simply let her fingers guide the notes, and the notes guided the hearts of those who listened. He felt a strange mixture of humility and awe, emotions, unfamiliar but welcome. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the silence that followed was profound. He had expected sound to fade, but it lingered in his mind, in the air, in every corner of the room. He wanted to speak, to thank her, to express the depth of what he felt, but words failed him. Instead, he simply said, "That was remarkable." She nodded, her eyes calm. "I am glad it spoke to you, sir." He realized that the music had revealed more than talent. It had revealed character, history, and heart. It had touched parts of him that he had long neglected, parts that no wealth or possession could reach. The days that followed were filled with small changes. The millionaire began seeking her company more often, not for entertainment, but for understanding. He asked about her childhood, her experiences, the moments that shaped her life. She answered with humility and honesty, sharing fragments of her journey without embellishment, revealing a past that was difficult but rich with lessons and resilience. In return, he began to open himself in ways he had never done with anyone. He spoke of his regrets, the isolation he had felt despite his wealth, and the constant pressure to maintain an image. She listened, not with judgment, but with empathy, offering a quiet presence that was comforting. Her music had bridged the gap between them, and now her understanding made that connection deeper. One afternoon, a sudden storm arrived. Rain pelted against the windows, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The mansion, usually a place of order and control, seemed small against the vastness of the storm. He found her playing the piano, the melody rising and falling with the rhythm of the rain. The notes intertwined with the storm's sound, creating a harmony that felt both chaotic and soothing. He watched, mesmerized, as she played. Each chord reflected the storm outside, yet there was calmness within her music, a balance that he could not comprehend, but deeply admired. It was as if she had learned to navigate life's tempests and could translate them into sound, teaching him, without words, how to find serenity amidst chaos. After the storm subsided, he approached her again. "You have a gift," he said softly, "not just in music, but in seeing the world differently. You show me how to notice what I have ignored." She smiled faintly, not arrogantly, but with quiet acknowledgement. "Music has always helped me understand life. I am glad it can do the same for you." The mansion, once a place of appearances and strict order, was changing. Rooms that had felt distant and cold now carried warmth. The staff moved with renewed purpose, inspired by the subtle harmony between their employer and the housekeeper. Even the millionaire's friends noticed the change, though none could articulate exactly what it was. The atmosphere was lighter, more genuine, as if the mansion itself had absorbed the honesty and emotion that music had brought. Over time, the housekeeper began experimenting with new compositions. She did not play for show or approval, but to express what she felt. The millionaire, increasingly captivated, listened attentively, learning to recognize the nuances and emotions conveyed through her playing. He realized that this was not merely entertainment, it was education, a lesson in empathy, patience, and observation. One evening, he asked her to teach him a piece, to show him not just how to play, but how to feel the music. She hesitated, then agreed. Their sessions were quiet and intimate, filled with mistakes, laughter, and discovery. For the first time, he understood the discipline and patience required to create something beautiful. The act of learning became a shared experience, breaking down barriers between them. The bond between them deepened through these sessions. She shared stories behind the melodies. She composed, and he responded with reflections from his own life. They spoke openly, honestly, and without pretense. Through music, they found a language that conveyed trust, admiration, and understanding far beyond words. Word of her skill began to spread quietly among trusted circles. Guests who had experienced her playing were moved by her talent and the mawdhar, depth of feeling she conveyed. The millionaire found himself proud, not boastful, but genuinely appreciative of her abilities and the impact she had on others. Despite the admiration, she remained humble. She did not seek recognition, only understanding. Her music was a reflection of her soul, and she shared it willingly, but without expectation. The millionaire, increasingly aware of her integrity, found himself inspired to emulate that quiet strength in his own life. Over months, the mansion transformed. Music, once a background element, became the heartbeat of the house. The staff, inspired by the change, worked with more enthusiasm. The millionaire found himself more reflective, more patient, and more empathetic. The housekeeper's presence had reshaped not just his understanding of art, but his understanding of life. One day, as she played a particularly moving piece, the millionaire realized that laughter and entertainment had become secondary to him. He no longer sought amusement for its own sake. What he valued now was authenticity, emotion, and connection. Through her music, she had taught him to listen, to feel, and to appreciate moments that mattered. The housekeeper, for her part, continued to embrace her role with grace. She understood the influence she held, yet she remained grounded, focusing on her art and her duties. Her music had become a catalyst for transformation, not just for the millionaire, but for everyone in the mansion who experienced it. By the end of the season, the mansion felt like a different place. Music had infused life into every room, conversation, and moment. The millionaire, who had once measured success by wealth and power, now measured it by understanding, empathy, and the quiet impact of shared experiences. The housekeeper, through her talent and character, had reshaped a world that seemed untouchable by emotion, bringing warmth, connection, and humanity back into the heart of the mansion. In this way, the piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge, a teacher, and a messenger. Through its keys, they had learned patience, humility, and the value of emotional truth. And in the quiet aftermath of each note, both the millionaire and the housekeeper discovered that the most profound riches were not counted in gold, but in the depth of human connection and the courage to express what lay within the heart. The mansion was quiet that morning, with sunlight streaming softly through the tall windows. The millionaire walked through the hallways, his thoughts lingering on the housekeeper and her music. For weeks, her presence and the melodies she played had changed the way he saw the world. He had started noticing small details, the way the light hit the piano keys, the rhythm of her hands, the calmness she carried. He understood, slowly but surely, that her music was more than skill. It was a reflection of her life, her resilience, and her heart. He found her arranging flowers near the lounge. She looked up and smiled, a gentle smile that carried warmth without needing words. He walked toward her, feeling a mixture of respect and anticipation. "Play something for me today," he said quietly. "I want to understand more." She nodded, moving to the piano with her usual grace. She sat and placed her fingers on the keys, closing her eyes briefly as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she began to play. The notes were soft at first, almost hesitant, but gradually they grew more confident and expressive. Each chord carried emotion, each pause told a story, and each rise and fall of the melody created a journey that no one could predict. He listened, captivated. The music seemed to reach into corners of his soul he had long ignored. Memories of childhood, forgotten moments of laughter, quiet disappointments, and hidden dreams surfaced, all wrapped in the sound of the piano. For the first time, he felt a deep connection not only to the music, but to the person creating it. He realized that this woman, who had been hired simply to clean and maintain, had the power to touch hearts in ways he had never imagined. When the piece ended, he sat in silence, letting the notes linger in his mind. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, to thank her, but words felt inadequate. She looked at him with quiet understanding, waiting for him to find the courage to express what he felt. Finally, he said, "Your music, it tells more than I can say. I feel it, but I cannot put it into words." She smiled faintly. "Music often says what words cannot," she replied. Her voice was calm, unassuming, yet it carried a sincerity that made him realize she spoke with truth, not just courtesy. Over the next few days, he observed her more closely. He watched how she moved through the mansion, how she tended to the smallest details, and how she approached her work with care and thoughtfulness. He began asking her about her life, her experiences, the moments that had shaped her. She answered quietly, sharing stories of childhood struggles, lessons learned, and the role music had played in guiding her through difficult times. She spoke not for sympathy, but to reveal her journey and the strength she had cultivated along the way. One afternoon, while the rain tapped against the windows, he found her playing a new composition. The melody was different from anything he had heard before, brave, introspective, and filled with longing. He listened closely, feeling the depth of her emotion in every note. The music was no longer just an art form. It was a bridge, connecting them through unspoken understanding. He realized that she had faced hardships and challenges, yet she remained strong and humble, using her talent to navigate the world and share her heart. After the music ended, he approached her and said quietly, "I have never met anyone like you. Your strength, your humility, and the way you express yourself. It changes the way I see life." She nodded. "I have only done what I could with what I have. Music helped me survive, and now it seems it can help you see more clearly." He understood that her words were not boastful. They were simple and true, and in that simplicity he saw the depth of her character. For the first time, he realized that the value of a person could not be measured by wealth or status, but by resilience, kindness, and the ability to touch others with honesty. As the weeks passed, the millionaire found himself increasingly drawn to her world. He asked her to teach him, not just the mechanics of playing the piano, but how to feel the music, how to understand its emotions. She agreed, guiding him patiently, helping him learn to connect with each note, to appreciate its meaning. The lessons were quiet, intimate, and full of discovery. He began to realize that learning was not just about acquiring skill, but about listening, feeling, and understanding life itself. The mansion changed along with them. The staff noticed the difference, feeling the warmth and harmony that music brought. Even the friends of the millionaire remarked on the change, noticing that he seemed calmer, more reflective, and more genuine in his interactions. Music had not only transformed him, but it had subtly shifted the energy of the entire household. One evening, she played a piece that was both joyful and melancholic, reflecting the complexity of life itself. As he listened, he thought about his past mistakes, the people he had overlooked, and the opportunities he had missed in pursuit of wealth. Her music reminded him that life was not about possessions, but about moments of connection, understanding, and the courage to be vulnerable. After the piece, he spoke, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "I feel as if I have learned something important from you, not just about music, but about life, about being human." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting quiet acknowledgement. Music is life in sound. It tells stories that words cannot, and it teaches patience, empathy, and understanding. He realized that her presence had been a mirror, showing him truths he had avoided for years. Through her music and her humility, he learned to listen, to feel, and to appreciate the small, meaningful moments that he had overlooked. The housekeeper, who had entered his life quietly and without expectation, had changed it profoundly. As time went on, he invited her to play not only for him, but for close friends and family, sharing her talent and the emotion it carried. Each performance was met with admiration, yet she remained humble, never seeking praise, only sharing the music that had been her guide through life's challenges. The millionaire, inspired by her integrity, began to reconsider his own priorities, learning that true influence came not from wealth or status, but from the ability to touch others' hearts. One rainy afternoon, as the piano echoed through the halls, he found himself reflecting on how far they had both come. The mansion, once a place of formality and distance, had become a home of warmth, understanding, and genuine connection. He realized that he had discovered not just talent in the housekeeper, but a mentor of sorts, someone who taught him the value of humility, empathy, and emotional honesty. In these quiet shared moments, they discovered a profound bond. It was not spoken of openly, yet it was undeniable. Music had been the catalyst, opening doors to understanding, respect, and the kind of trust that grows slowly but lasts a lifetime. The millionaire knew that he had been given a rare gift, the chance to learn from someone who had endured life's hardships with grace and strength, and to be reminded of the human heart's capacity for change. The housekeeper, for her part, continued to play and teach quietly, never seeking attention, yet leaving a lasting impression on everyone who heard her. She had found a place where her talent was appreciated, where her heart was understood, and where she could share her gift without compromise. Through her music, she had touched lives, and in the process, transformed the millionaire's understanding of life, happiness, and connection. By the end of the season, both the millionaire and the housekeeper had grown in ways neither could have anticipated. Music had become their shared language, a means of communication, understanding, and emotional growth. The mansion, filled with light, sound, and quiet reflection, had become a place where hearts could speak, lessons could be learned, and life could be appreciated beyond appearances. And in the midst of wealth, power, and luxury, it was the simple, honest music of one woman that reminded them both of what truly mattered: humanity, empathy, and the courage to express one's soul. The mansion had grown quieter over the weeks, not from emptiness, but from understanding. The millionaire had discovered that the grandeur of wealth could not replace the warmth of genuine human connection, and the housekeeper's music had become the heart of that change. He found himself waking early, eager to hear the first notes of her day, the gentle sound that reminded him of life's subtleties and its beauty. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the tall windows and cast patterns on the polished floor, he approached her quietly. She was arranging a small bouquet of flowers near the piano, her movements graceful and deliberate. He stood at the doorway for a moment, absorbing the calmness that surrounded her. "Will you play for me today?" he asked softly. She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Of course, sir." She sat at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. She closed her eyes briefly, as if listening to something only she could hear, and then began. The music filled the hall, soft and flowing, carrying a gentle rhythm that mirrored the steady beating of life itself. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful, creating a melody that spoke of resilience, hope, and quiet strength. He listened intently, feeling the emotions carried through the music, recognizing the depth of experience behind every chord. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, as if in reverence, the usual echoes replaced by a sense of intimacy and presence. He realized that her music was not just sound. It was life, and it had taught him to listen more carefully, to feel more deeply, and to appreciate the beauty in ordinary moments. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the millionaire remained silent for a moment. Words were insufficient to capture what he felt. Then quietly he said, "You have changed my world, not just through music, but through your presence, your honesty, your strength. I don't know how to thank you." She looked at him with calm understanding. "You don't need to thank me. Music is a gift, and it speaks for itself. If it has helped you see life differently, that is enough." He realized in that moment that he had learned something far greater than he had anticipated. He had learned humility, patience, and empathy. He had learned that wealth and status could not substitute for understanding that the smallest acts of sincerity held more value than the grandest displays of power. And he understood that this lesson, delivered not through words, but through the art of music, would remain with him forever. In the following days, the mansion was alive with subtle transformation. The staff moved with a lighter step, inspired by the harmony and respect between their employer and the housekeeper. Guests who visited noticed the change, sensing a warmth and authenticity that had never been present before. The millionaire, once consumed by appearances, now found joy in small, meaningful interactions, appreciating the depth of character and emotion in those around him. The housekeeper continued to play, her melodies evolving with time, reflecting not only her past experiences, but the shared understanding that had developed between them. Her music became a source of solace, reflection, and inspiration. The millionaire often requested pieces for moments of contemplation, finding in the sound a clarity and guidance that words alone could not provide. One afternoon, as a gentle rain tapped against the windows, he observed her playing a new composition. The melody was reflective, carrying hints of sorrow intertwined with hope. It spoke of challenges faced, of resilience found, and of the beauty that could emerge from struggle. He listened, recognizing not just the music, but the story she wove through it, a story of perseverance, courage, and grace. After the final note faded, he approached her, his voice soft but sincere. "I feel that I have learned from you more than from anyone else in my life. Your music, your presence, it has opened my eyes. It has reminded me of what truly matters." She nodded, a gentle smile on her lips. "We all teach and learn in our own ways. I am glad that music could help you understand." In the weeks that followed, the bond between them deepened. They shared quiet conversations, exploring thoughts about life, purpose, and human connection. The millionaire began to approach life with a renewed sense of empathy, considering the feelings and experiences of others in ways he had never done before. The housekeeper, confident yet humble, continued to guide and inspire through her art and character. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and ostentation, had transformed into a place of harmony and understanding. Music filled its halls with meaning, and the relationships within it grew richer. The millionaire learned to value sincerity over show, compassion over dominance, and connection over status. And in the housekeeper, he found not just a remarkable talent, but a teacher, a friend, and a reflection of the strength and resilience that life demanded. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in warm hues, he watched her play a piece that was gentle, yet full of emotion. The melody spoke of endings and beginnings, of closure and hope. As he listened, he understood that the lessons of the past months had led to this moment, a realization that life's richest rewards were not found in wealth, power, or recognition, but in understanding, empathy, and shared humanity. Final note faded. He approached her, eyes reflecting gratitude and admiration. "I cannot imagine my life before this, before your music, before your guidance. I am truly grateful." She met his gaze, her expression serene. "Gratitude is felt in actions and understanding. You have learned well, and that is all that matters." From that day forward, the mansion continued to be a place of learning, reflection, and music. The millionaire embraced his life with a renewed perspective, appreciating people, moments, and experiences that had once seemed insignificant. The housekeeper continued to share her gift, influencing hearts and minds through melodies that told stories words could never convey. In the end, the piano had done more than fill the mansion with music. It had brought humility to the proud, clarity to the confused, and connection to hearts that had been separated by status and expectation. And in the quiet shared moments between the millionaire and the housekeeper, a profound truth was revealed. The greatest wealth lies not in gold or power, but in understanding, empathy, and the courage to express one's heart freely. The mansion, once a symbol of solitude and grandeur, now stood as a testament to transformation. Through the power of music, a housekeeper had touched the soul of a millionaire, teaching him that laughter, joy, and fulfillment come not from amusement alone, but from the quiet recognition of human connection, the appreciation of life's subtleties, and the courage to embrace one's own heart and the hearts of others. And in this understanding, both of them found a peace and richness that no fortune could ever buy.